Launching the first trailer for Furiosa, which is part of the Mad Max saga, which I finished shooting a year and a bit ago, and that's the first bit of footage I had seen, and there was a lot of anticipation from myself and from the fan base that has been there for, I think, 45 years, from the first Mad Max film to now. And it was incredible. There's thousands of people there, huge response, and it was a beautiful way to kick off the launch of the press for the film, which comes out next May, June, I think.
And boy, we're waiting for that. You know what, can we do a little bit of sharing about what Chris and I were talking about regarding George Miller, who made that film? George Miller, I was just saying to Chris, we were just talking about the fact that, how many years ago was it, the first one?
The first one, I think, was 45 years ago.
45 years ago, as a kid, I saw George Miller make this film in Australia. He's Australian, and it's what Akira Kurosawa would have referred to as an immaculate reality, a created world, just like Star Wars. The other George did that one. And, you know, I saw that, and I think that inspired me, and Chris, you were saying inspired you. It inspired all of us, that as Australians, we can have our own way of telling stories. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a young kid even before I had the enthusiasm or passion to be an actor or to be in the industry. I remember watching Mad Max and vividly have memories of the messaging in it and the type of storytelling, the shots, where it was shot. It was sort of iconically Australian, but post-apocalyptic, and had this universal appeal to it. And then later on, when I sort of thought about getting into acting, you know, the fact that Mel Gibson was in the film, and as a young, I think he was 20-something, who had, you know, basically kind of the bridge for a lot of Australians then going to America, and then he had made it there, and then George Miller, as an Australian, as you say, creating that film and that franchise and that carrying on, was kind of a dream come true to be a part of that world. And I was talking to George when we were shooting in Broken Hill, where the first film was shot, and we went and saw Top Gun one night in the same cinema that he had watched the rushes in from the first Mad Max 45 years ago. But as you say, he created a world much like, you know, the films that you have created. You've created your own genre. You know, when you say a Baz Luhrmann film, there is an aesthetic and an appeal and a visual vibrance that is unique to any other genre, but any other filmmaker, which I think is pretty incredible.
You know what? I'm just sitting here. Well, this is not scripted. I'm just sitting here responding to you, and I'm thinking it kind of relates to what's going on and what I've experienced here. Because we come from, although it's a large land, it's a very small country in terms of population. And when you think back, when I was growing up, there was just Mel Gibson and Judy Davis. They had international profiles, maybe a couple of others. Then after that came, you know, the wave of Nicole and Russell, and then came Cade, and then there's you, the new generation. I don't like to think you was the new young'uns.
Still young enough, 40 but still.
Yeah. But what's great about this is that back then, one person like George, having the commitment to tell a story in his way, to make it his own, inspired me, inspired others, inspired you, and then other actors saw Mel and went like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And it grew into this very vibrant industry. And I think that's true here. That's been an experience I've seen here. There was one female filmmaker some years ago, made a movie, inspired other filmmakers. You can see that one brave choice, one brave act of storytelling can have ripple effects that make things grow for years, you know.
Absolutely. And we discussed this before about taking a leap, doing something different, going outside the box. The fear and the anxiety that comes with that is something to face, and overcoming that and choosing to tell a story from your perspective, to be influenced by other people but not to be directly mimicking anyone else. It is in your voice. There's courage to that, you know, and the beauty of storytelling, whether it be through books, personal interaction or film, is that it provokes and sparks creativity, new thoughts, the different influences, different ways of seeing things. There's moral influences and messages behind it. It can be pure escapism and entertainment, but I think when it's done right, there's something underneath it which, you know, individuals interpret in different ways, and that I think is incredible. It's an individual experience on one hand, but the collaboration is, for me, the most beautiful part of it. You know, the pressure and what removes the anxiety for me, stepping on stage, I'm sure for you as well, is it's not just me. There's an entire team of people and voices that are a part of that set, but also it's also the accumulation of many, many years before the people who have come before us and have taken that step. And so I love being a part of the industry and the space.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's this feeling of not being alone, you know, and on the outside, it's sometimes perceived as, you know, an X person's film with X player in it. But it's hard to understand just how communal it really is. And that feeling, I sometimes, I said glibly or in passing once, it's like a circus but run like an army, you know. I'm not sure if that's true, but the feeling is like you are all in this together. And the telling of this story collectively, it's like David Lean said, is like drawing a picture, but 300 people are holding the pencil, you know? And people, you say it and people go like, oh, sure, no, you just tell everyone what to do. No, it doesn't work that way. You've all got to be sharing the story and holding that pen,
I think when it goes wrong, it occurs like that. Then when there's, you know, individuals that are working and it feels like everyone else on the set is in the way of their vision, you know, as opposed to the accumulative effect. And I imagine that's how it would be with you, just working with George Miller, you know, the concern and the involvement for every single individual, you know, he'll call cut, walk on set, making sure the stunt person's okay, the lighting guys are happy, makeup, hair, everyone's okay, everyone's good, great. And then you get a film that there's a humility, I think, to his filmmaking, as big and bold and confident as it is. There's an authenticity and something people to relate to, and I think there is something beyond the obvious, that there's sort of the fabric of it about kindness and collaboration and a shared experience that resonates with an audience.
Yeah, I mean, there are as many different directors as there are actors. I always say every actor is a thumbprint. Like, when I start working with an actor, you find what is the language, right? But it's funny because George, we're talking a lot about George. George, you owe me for this. Just kidding. I love him and he inspired me. But it's interesting, I haven't really been on George's set, but we do work in a similar way. It really is, I don't know, George from a small country town, I only learned it the other day. I think there might just be still a feeling that to make a film is it's certainly not a job. It still might just be a privilege to be able to do it.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. We've obviously never been on a set together. I'd love to. By the way, I'll give you my resume. So finish.
Can someone look up? The name's Chris Hemsworth. Can someone give me a CV? Oh, I see.
A couple of TV shows. I've got an Instagram.
Right, well, that seems to be a career that's evolved.
Good.
I'll keep you in mind. All right. Yeah. Listen, I have a script. Have a little read for me.
Great, done. Everyone see that? It's official. Right?
I'm dying to work with you, my friend. I'll say that right.
I'm waiting in the wings. But from what I've heard, that is how you work, which is obviously the end product, which I've seen, as we all have in the cinema, blown away by. But there is an integral, again, collaborative nature to how you work. But I wanted to ask you, the first film, 1992, Strictly Ballroom. So what would be 35 years ago? You made 6 films, right? That's a long time between each film, right? And I didn't even realise it, because I think the films hold such vivid space in the industry that I assume they've kind of collectively all the time, but it's just you're rewatching one after another. Is the space in between each film there's so much put into it that there needs to be a reset, or is there something you need to wait for the right spark to light the fire to step back in the ring? Wow,
I know what you're trying to say. What you're really trying to say in a short language is, what the hell are you doing between movies that takes so long?
Why don't you make more? Because I love them and I want to see more of them. That's the
Hey, Chris, okay, I will really answer this honestly, because let me tell you, I'm asked myself that question a lot. And partly you got it right, I think, in that I live these movies. Like, a bit like George, actually. He didn't make a lot of movies either. And I think the thing is that I'm there at the inception of the idea, of the evolution of the text. I'm working with Siam, who's in the house, Catherine Marn. She's got 4 Oscars. Hello, Catherine. Very early on in developing the visual language. I'm working on the music language in 7. Then when we get actually to once I know the story, then in the casting process, I mean, I don't do sort of auditions, I do workshops, you know what I mean? Like, and that's very absorbing. So what I'm trying to get at is I am there, and then I'm very involved, and this is a bit unusual, in the music. So I actually produce music, I have a label with RCA, so I'm kind of right there, and then the communications and the tours. So just take Elvis. I was realizing that I finished Elvis, which seemed like the one I just, 2 years ago. And then there was a whole year in communicating, getting into the cinema, and then there was the award season, and I woke up and go like, 2 years? I wasn't going to do that this time. So I call it a sort of, well, I call it the methadone program, a debriefing. I have to get it out of my system, one. I like to reconnect with what it is to be an audience, to stop being being the brand, and you know what I mean? For a couple of years, you never really open a door, you're always rushing around with people. And then, this is what you said, I've got at least a dozen things that I want to make that I won't make before I die. And I move them up, I experiment with them, and I'm just looking for making sure I make what is useful to put out there and what will be enriching and make me grow. That choice is the most important choice. I can get other choices wrong, but making the wrong one, so it's a combination of both. Plus I do a lot of other creative things. Yeah. Like I have these creative adventures that aren't film.
Yeah, right. You know? I mean, you write a lot, short films, commercials.
I do. We've done hotels. Yeah. We've published magazines, Vogue. I did an election campaign once. Like crazy, totally like nothing to do, but all storytelling. Yeah. Ideas and storytelling. Yeah. Having said that, I do want to try and get on with it a bit more. Yeah. So thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I'm doing therapy. I never thought I'd get with Chris to do therapy.
Well, it's been 2 years since Elvis, and then our next film, I don't want to wait 3 years, so as your doctor,
get on with it.
The next 12 months we'll have it. Good.
That's correct.
With your preparation, I know you're meticulous about every aspect of the process, and I ask because I'd love to direct at some point. Do you find you do all that work, train up the instincts, and then when you're on set, is there an improvisational element, or you stick to the story?
Actually, yeah. Well, amazing, Chris. Seems like you're around on one of the sets. We're insanely focused on research. Then I develop all sorts of materials and things, and I bring every actor into the world, every person, every participant, a bit like George. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you do, catering, bring them all in the world, get everyone in the room, take them through everything. But when we're on set, we have a really clear plan, we're really gunning for something, but the ability to go like, you know what? It's like one thing happened with Austin, we were doing the Elvis scene, and we rehearsed him doing, you know in the film he runs around, and he's getting he's inspiring the orchestra to play the music the way he is for Vegas. And we did it to playback for 2 years, and on the day it wasn't working. Wow. And I just went to him and said, look, he said, I know, and he was really in a bit of a panic. I said, these are all musicians. Let's just turn it all off and you do it for real, you know? Or just change things. So yeah, it's so inside all of us that we can be dexterous on the spot, you know? I got a question for you.
No, but just on that, I remember talking to Robert Downey about this, about improvisation, and he said you can only improvise through preparation, right. You know, and it's you have some tricks up your sleeve and ideas, but the only way that you can truly let go and inhabit the character instinctually and truthfully to that moment is if you have a backlog of information and story. And I guess that's the same way that you can take a different turn in the middle of a moment like that. But because I'm sure Austin had rehearsed and practiced for however many months, and you had been meticulously organising and prepping as well.
You know what? Now we're talking about different. Tom Hanks said to me, you said Robert Andrew, I say Tom Hanks, and we're calling them all in, the big guys. But Tom Hanks said to me, because Tom went through the whole process, but he said to me something exactly like that. He said, you know, working with you is a bit like working with a jazz musician. We all learn the tune, but then the ability to embellish, improvise around it. So go for what you're going for, but then I'm totally down with. I never say no. I've never said no. Someone goes like, well, look, we do it this way, I go, this way, and I say, what if we, okay, let's try it, you know? Like, I love that part of it.
Yeah, I do too, and I feel like that's where my most memorable moments on a set have been from confronting a fear or surrendering to it or letting go. You know, when you keep it within a box and everything is prepped and planned, it's great. There's an expectation to it, the predictability to it, the spontaneity, and the more obscure alternative comes from going, you know what, I'm going to let go of the wheel for a second, or the reins, and see what happens. And there's a risk. I mean, we were discussing this earlier about, you know, fear versus anxiety, but they're actually the same thing. It's the same physical response you have through the anticipation of something that you're enthusiastic about or terrified. But it's perspective, and it's your own view, and do you label that experience as a negative or as a positive? Is this nervous energy going to make me think quicker, or is it going to make me shut down? And the you know, the letting go, I guess, again, and the giving in to the experience that's when I think unexpected things happen and the magic happens. They're my favourite moments, and it's terrifying. there is a kind of element of like, it's all going to fail, but man, when it works, it's beautiful.
No, it's so true. Like, I like to pride myself on, I mean, what we really do in different ways is that we play act for a living. Now, children, it's called a screenplay. You go and see a play. We are but players, Shakespeare says. Now, children play, and they're not paid for it. You know, they just play. But if they're scared, they can't play. So you've got to remove a certain degree of fear, and I think that comes from preparation. If we're all prepped, we're not so scared. But nonetheless, when we're out there in the middle of it, a little bit of fear comes, and that degree of fear, if curated correctly, just takes you that little bit further. I got something to jump onto. We were talking earlier today, and I might be right off track, so don't say, yeah, that's totally right. But I'm not a sports person at all, but my best friend surfs, and you surf as well, right? And I'm just thinking, like, with the surfing we were talking about today, like a sport, great sports people, they kind of do the same thing. They train. But when you're out there, there must be a moment in which you sort of get out of your way. Yeah. Is there a metaphor in that?
Absolutely. I remember when the first TV show I ever did, Home and Away, was a soap opera back in Australia, and I had all these, when I first started acting when I was 18, I was like, I want to go to Hollywood, I want to be a movie star, and then end up on a soap opera. And I was like, okay, well, this will be my training ground. And I remember being so terrified and nervous, and the last thing I'd think about before I went to bed, and the first thing when I woke up was a shot of adrenaline. Oh God, I'm going to fail, and someone's going to see this performance, it's going to be rubbish, I'll never work again, etc., etc. And one of the directors I worked with said, you ever play football, Chris? And I said, yeah, I played a lot of football. You know, what kind of sports do you like? I like surfing, athletics. And he said, when you're in the middle of a game, are you ever thinking, now I need to hold the ball like this and guide it to my foot like this and kick? And I said, actually no. And he goes, yeah, because you've done that work. As you are on a set, you've done your preparation, you've learnt the lines, you know the character. It's instinctual now. Get out the way of yourself, let go. It's the same with surfing, any sport, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, because actually you do all the training. I mean, I was terrible at football, but you've done all the training. Now it's time to play ball. And the word again is play. Just play. And you cannot play, even jazz music, even great musicians, you know, like Kids on the Thing or whatever, there's a certain point at which the practice is done. It flows through you. You know?
It is, and it's a sort of I mean, in the best days, you have your good days and bad days, but there's a dreamlike state that occurs where you're aware of everything around you and the cameras and so on, but you're hyper focused to this, and the memory of it afterwards is like, I think that was good, but you float through it, you know, and there's fragments of the memory, and it's a combination of being hyper focused and completely in awe of kind of what's going on in the process. But again, then it becomes spontaneous. The same way when you talk to anyone, you're not, I mean, sometimes you are, but most of the time you're not thinking 3 or 4 questions ahead, nor should you be thinking 3 or 4 lines of dialogue ahead, you know?
Well, that brings us to listening, doesn't it? Yeah. So once you've really done it, I mean, one of those basic things in acting, I think, is that you've done it so much, that you're not thinking about how am I going to do my line, you're listening to the other player, and you let your senses and you let yourselves actually, that's the fear bit actually. The fear bit is probably like letting go. Like the non-fear bit is hanging on. That's the opposite of that instinct, you know?
We were working years ago in the practical aesthetics space, in as far as, you know, drama training. And it was all about having an action and intention, but affecting the other person, rather than thinking, oh, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z in the scene. Well, you may as well do that in front of the mirror at home. Whereas if it's an outward projection and it's I'm trying to affect you and you're trying to affect me, then the listening is easy because I have no choice but to react to what you're sending me.
That kind of brings you to this other part, which is when I'm assembling or casting and all of that. Like, for example, I've made a lot of films, and quite often there's a romantic couple in, I think, all of them. I've got to check. For someone who's only made 6 films, I can't remember anything. But, well, there is actually, even in, well, yeah, but the thing is, yeah, but you know what? You always can't make that decision in isolation. You've got to know that those two keys are going to be able to play off each other. You know what I mean? And you're kind of, I mean, you can survive, but you really are as good as the other players in the team. Again, the sports metaphor, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why because I think there is a romantic element throughout all of your films. Is there something that happened by chance, or is that a goal specific?
Doctor, how long do you have? Is there a couch? Well,
so we've had childhood.
Back then, this time. So terrible. You know, I really, you know, I kind of, I think there are kind of other works and other pieces I want to do, like that don't have love at the center of it. And the weirdest thing is that every time I go towards those subjects, I end up finding the fundamental relationship. And I guess I have to admit I am a romantic. I mean, in the end, I'm kind of a romantic. I'm that guy. And even if I did a war film, it's probably, there'll be some kind of emotional romance in it. You know what I mean? Like, and even, I guess, I always think even if you're doing, I think if you're doing probably something where there's a darker character, there's an anti-romanticism in it. I mean, those characters don't do what they do, except they need love so much they'll kill you for it, you know? So it's in there somewhere.
And look, I think it's a wonderful thing that obviously the universal language, regardless of where you're from, is love, you know? Connection, empathy, collaboration, and no matter what grouping or what, you know, education you had or what point of society, that love is what connects us all. And I think that's why your films and films that have a focus on that do resonate so broadly. I mean, look at one of the biggest films of all time, Titanic, love story, you know? And I think I think it's a fantastic thing. And even in regards to the villain, you know, obviously the villain never thinks he's the villain, and if you can find a way to empathise with the villain, you look at the Joker with Heath Ledger, it's you immediately you understand and feel for the individual, no matter what, you know, on paper it may have seemed what he was doing wrong, but you're going, he's kind of got a point. He's had a troubled childhood. He's come from abuse or some form of conflict, and this has built him into this person. So is he entirely to blame, or is this free will, or where does that stand? And I love all the questions that circulate from that. But in regards to the sort of villains on screen, the ones that resonate the most are ones that you see as human.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And that you actually go, and there's a bad guy, but I kind of understand where he's come from. I felt that too once. I felt slighted. I felt, you know, you got to find the in. I got a question for you, actually. Like, by the way, it's great to hear that you think about, not every actor wants to direct or do that, but I always say to them, gee, if you've got any inkling to do it whatsoever, absolutely do it, because there's nothing like being able to, you know, be on the other side or be in it. It's just storytelling in the end, no matter what you're doing, what part of that is. But do you think, what I was thinking about this here, so what might be interesting to all of you out there, do you think, maybe this is too abstract a question, do you think you could sum up on set or in the process what you think the biggest difference is between what you do as an actor and what the director is doing? I mean, there's practical things, but do you kind of ever think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you just said sort of in a military kind of space, you know, the director is leading the charge and it trickles down from the top, and so, and I see this all the time, and you go, wow, the responsibility that individual has. Yes, it's a broad collaboration and involvement of many, many people and many voices, but the tonality of it is designed and orchestrated through that one individual. If the director's having a tantrum and non-appreciative or non-inclusive of those on set, that's a difference between the crew member going home and, you know, yelling at his kids or her kids or you know, giving them a cuddle and playing football. That's, you know, like you have the ability to the ripple effect on people's lives, and I think that there's a huge responsibility there, and I think it all the time, and I really appreciate the ones that are aware of that, but also look at the productivity within any workspace. If people feel acknowledged and seen, then they're going to show up, and productivity improves 20, 30, 40%. And some people don't understand that, and it baffles me, you know, but the difference between, I think my job, I see myself as in service of the director's vision, but also I know I've been hired to have a voice, and there's been times that I've done films, and you know, films that I wasn't as proud of what I had done in the film, because I was so in awe of the director and so ready, like, where do you want me, what do you want, you know. And as much as you assume that that's the respectful thing to do, they actually want to hear your voice, you know. Yeah.
You know what I call it? The empty vessel. Yeah. The empty vessel syndrome. Well, I don't really find that, because by the time I get there, you know, I say I don't even have extras in my movies, and I don't. When we have those big party scenes and things, I mean, when Sam starts work, I look, yes, and even when they come to do costume fittings, Sam and I will talk about their character, who they are, give them a briefing. So, and I met someone spontaneously, this happens a lot. So, oh, you don't know me, but I was an extra on Elvis in the da-da-da scene. I said, yes, I remember you. You were the one with it, because I know the photographs that we were copying so well. Yeah, you know. And she's like, oh, God, it was so hard. But when you and the guys would come on, we just wanted it to be so good. Yeah, wow. We would give ourselves to it. And I think that's what you're talking about. 100%. It actually counts when it's difficult. Yes, yeah. When they're tough. It gets tough sometimes. Yeah, half the people don't understand they don't make movies. Sometimes people just go, yeah, it's tough. It's
back to George Miller, but that's my most recent experience, which is why I bring it up. But a lot of the actors within the film some were ex-criminals, one was a Hell's Angel bikie, people from very colourful, interesting, complicated lives. And he would interview these people and not get them to do the script, but tell me a story, tell me about yourself. And he said that all of a sudden, like, there was such a truth there, but they had been seen for the first time. Someone hadn't, you know, pushed them aside and said, well, you know, you've messed up, you know, you're finished. They were given a second chance. There was a redemption quality to it. But exactly what you said, on those long days and it's raining or it's really hot or whatever the complications is with the set, they're all right there ready to go. You know, follow him into battle, you know, thick or thin, they're showing up. So, you know what? You remind me of, I feel like, you know, a couple of Aussies telling Aussie stories. But Peter Weir was so great to me when I was young. Like, I mean, I had not made my first film, and I knew him through a mutual friend, and I met him, and, you know, he was so helpful, and Jane Campion, so great. In fact, I think the Australian-New Zealand fraternity of directors, and generally we're a very supportive, not generally, very supportive community. But he said to me, you know, it's probably the only thing left increasingly on the world that's where one person ultimately still has to make all the decisions. Now, I like to get to a place where I'm there, where the decisions reveal themselves, you know, but I know if we're all going to, do we go left or right, we go like, I'm feeling left, you know, like, but he was just talking about that, and, you know, like, probably that advice, that advice of getting so prepared, but then it goes back to what you were saying.
so prepared. So I go, look, we've come here to get this. Let's kick a few takes like that. But I always expect the actor. This is way back even in rehearsals.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I rehearse a lot. I love to rehearse. Never to come in on an empty vessel and say, so where do I, you know, that in a way, you're right. I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for other directors, but you're right. I really can't wait, because I tell you what I think it's like. Here's my funny, silly metaphor. I think like we can build the car, be in like racing, car racing, not that I'm a big car racing head, although I do like a nice sports car. But we can build the car, we can map it out, we can do the thing, we can be in the pits and all of that, but in the end, when I call action, the actor's behind the wheel. The actor's feeling it. The actor's got to be totally in the moment. So we've created the environment, we've got the instrument ready, we got to catch it, but the actor's got to be totally vulnerable. And that's what I always remember. I always remember, because I did a bit of acting.
I was going to say, you acted as well. Did you have that from that experience, or?
Yeah, I was. I did. Like I was like, what was I? I was a child actor. Well, I was like 18, something like that. I was in a movie with Judy Davis. My first job out of school. Yeah, and I was a pimp. Right. It was a seedy film. Let's not go into it. She was amazing.
Pull it up, actually. We've got some footage.
Yeah. Really? Earring and tattoo? What do you think? But the thing about it is, I learned, and I had a theatre company, and I was in the theatre company. I was in the first play version of Strictly Ballroom as not as the lead. Right. I played that sort of old father character. Yeah. I did at NIDA, which is our National Institute of Dramatic Art. Anyway. Feel like old stories here. Oh, we should get a fireplace and a cigar. You know? But what I'm really trying to get at is that I remember, like, you see, there's two things that happen. I remember doing a workshop at NIDA, and it was an actor's workshop, and there was a director, and we were shooting a scene. It might have actually been, oh no, it was Country Practice. I was on Country Practice. I was on Country
An Australian TV show.
Yeah. No. Well, it was now Home and Away, let me tell you. But can I tell you, the director called cut, and I was doing my bit, and he comes up and he goes, we're just going to change the lights. And really what he was doing was telling me nothing. I went away, right? But I think I recognized that no matter what I do or we do, in the end, you can dislike a film I've made, but the vulnerability of being an actor is actually say, I don't like you in the role. And that is just a different degree of vulnerability. And so I'm really aware of that when I'm working with actors. Just in the end, I can create the environment, we can have the text and the guidance, but it's that thing that we talked about of fear. You know? I mean, without doing more name dropping that I've already done. And I've worked with some of the most iconic performers in the world, great legends, and I mean not just in the acting space. And the ones that are truly great are still a little bit scared.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've had a conversation with Anthony Hopkins. He says, every film I think is the last one I'm ever going to do. And I was like, you still feel that? I mean, I do, you know. And then there's some relief in that. There's some sort of safety in numbers or comfort in knowing that emotion, I guess, is humility. And humility is where you continue to search and improve. You know, once you think you have all the answers, you close the door and there's you don't evolve any further. And so keep kind of telling myself I know nothing is I think the best advice I can give to myself, because I'm open to new ideas and new experiences. This is a broad, wide open sort of question, but what drew you to this space of directing?
Well, what happened was I would maintain, because I grew up in this tiny country town, Herons Creek, not far from, say, Coffs Harbour, right? But it was honestly a hell. The town, we were on the highway, and we had a gas station, a farm, and for a while Dad ran the local cinema. He'd been to Vietnam, so he knew how to sort of the guy who gave us the gas passed away. He ran the Hastings movie house. And Dad was also a filmmaker, met my mother through photography in Vietnam, blah, 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 blah. So I maintained that I was pretty much doing this from childhood. Like I was doing plays or telling stories or running a radio. I was creating a lot of fantasy. And then I had a tumultuous time with my family splitting up and all of that. Did a bit of a run into Sydney. Eventually reconnected with my mother. But even at high school, I was doing shows. I just always did it. I'd like to say like I thought of something else, but I was always doing it. And what I think is interesting though, Chris, is that because we went to NIDA where devising was very important, there was a point where we were like, oh, directing so much responsibility, I think I just want to act. But then I was just doing that acting a little bit, then I went like, but you don't really have, you're sitting around going like, oh, but wouldn't it be good if we could do, you know, it's a bit the empowerment thing. Yeah. So what really happens to me is, before I went to NIDA, I had a theatre company, and I was doing my own things, I was doing kind of reality stuff, and I just have always done it. Yeah. So the truth is, I wasn't drawn to it, I was in it from my earliest memory. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I, from a very young age, whether it be books, television, film, I enjoyed the fantasy. I enjoyed the escapism, the journey that the narrative, the story would take me on. I remember even when I was 16, 17, watching Lord of the Rings and thinking, oh, I want to be in that world. And it wasn't as an actor. I wanted to literally live in Middle-earth and fight goblins and orcs and so on. And there was, I guess, the sort of vivid imagination of me as a young kid carried through, still does to now, and that was the attraction, to inhabit different spaces and different worlds and be taken on a journey. And still to this point, as an audience, I watch films for that purpose. And having seen behind the curtain and the smoke and mirrors, and everything goes on, it's harder to be immersed in the experience completely. But when it works, and I completely forget that I'm sitting in a chair and I'm actually a part of that world, I am that character, I'm asking the same questions, I'm forced to contemplate what I would do in this situation or that situation, it is wonderful. And that's the same, I try to have that same, this most pure approach when I read a script now. It's got to be different to what I've done before, it's got to intrigue me in some ways, it's got to be great people involved. But just the little kid in me get excited. Is there a fire that's lit within, or an enthusiasm that's sparked, and then that ultimately is I think the truest way to approach something, or the truest reason for committing and diving into the film.